Good to have you with us on a Thursday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to start with the neck-and-neck race to the White House. Millions of Americans have already cast their ballot for the next president of the United States. With less than 3 weeks left until Election Day, the candidates are, of course, making that last-ditch effort to sway critical, undecided voters.
Vice President Harris sat down with Fox News for what was at times a deeply contentious interview. She said she will not be a continuation of Biden's presidency. And former President Trump made a plea to voters at a friendlier Fox event, an all-female town hall, saying some states' abortion laws are too tough. NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton is standing by in North Carolina, where in-person early voting starts today. But we begin with the latest from the candidates themselves. NBC News correspondent Alice Barr joins us from Washington with more on those Fox News appearances. Alice, good morning.
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. Looking ahead, former President Trump will be in New York for the Al Smith charity dinner tonight. But in a break with tradition, Vice President Harris will not attend, choosing instead to campaign in battleground Wisconsin after battling it out in a sometimes heated interview on Fox News.
To deal with affordable.
Vice President Harris in her first formal interview with Fox News, making her pitch to Republicans hesitant to vote for former President Trump.
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency.
In testy exchanges over immigration.
The 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished.
The vice president zeroed in on the bipartisan border bill former President Trump opposed.
If a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border.
And defended her shift from more liberal positions during her 2019 presidential bid.
I do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as vice president. I will not do that as president.
The sit-down followed a Pennsylvania appearance with former Republican officials, including one-time GOP Congressman Adam Kinzinger, calling out Donald Trump's rhetoric as he appeared in a Fox News town hall with all-women voters. Working to make up ground with female voters, the former president stressed his support for in vitro fertilization.
I'm the father of IVF, so I want to hear this question. We're totally in favor of IVF.
And called some states' abortion laws too tough.
They're too tough, and those are going to be redone.
Former President Trump also appeared in a Univision town hall voicing support for legal immigration.
We just want them to come in legally.
While not backing off false claims about Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio. Vice President Harris slammed former President Trump's comments on IVF, saying he should take responsibility for restrictions to reproductive rights in states across the country, including some threats to IVF. We have seen the former president has said that if elected, he would have the government or insurance companies foot the bill for IVF. Savannah and Joe.
All right, Alice Barr, thank you.
Now let's bring in NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton, who's on the ground in Black Mountain, North Carolina. That's in the western part of the state, which, as you remember, was hard hit by Hurricane Helene just weeks ago. Antonia, good morning. So today is the first day of early voting in North Carolina. It's thought of as a battleground state this time around. What are the polls showing going into today, and what type of turnout is expected? Are you seeing anything so far?
Good morning, guys. Well, look, the polls here have consistently showed in recent weeks that this is sort of anyone's game. It's a jump ball. And so what that means is turnout is everything, no matter whose side you're on. And early voting is really important in this state. In fact, in 2020, 65% of North Carolina voters utilized in-person early voting. So we expect major turnout. The one thing that could complicate all of that, of course, is the storm recovery. People have lost their jobs. They've lost their homes and cars in many cases. Their kids are still out of school in many of the counties in this area. And so the concern from people is that, look, it's going to be hard for people to physically get to the polls. It's no longer going to be their top priority. Take a listen to some of the conversations we've had with voters this week.
The whole political arena right now is in such chaos that I don't know. I really don't. I hope it will encourage people.
If I could, I'd go around and collect everybody in my little van, because I think it's very important that we get out and vote.
We're not worried about who becomes the next president, because in 4 years when they're gone, there's still going to be things in this valley and in these communities that's not going to be back to normal.
Here in Buncombe County, the elections officials are doing everything that they can to make sure that people can still make it to the polls. So they have made repairs to storm damaged sites like the library where I am right now. People are going to start voting here in about 2 hours. They had to make repairs here to get it ready. But they've also opened up an entirely new site, and they've made changes to absentee voting if that's what works best for people. You can go into county offices and just request your absentee ballot over the counter in Asheville. So that's a major change that they hope will really just accommodate people who are going through so much still several weeks out from this storm now, guys.
It's going to take an effort to get so many people to vote who maybe just weeks ago thought it would be normal, and it certainly is not now. We have to talk about the Republican candidate for governor in North Carolina, Mark Robinson. He's been accused of posting racist and explicit comments on a pornography website more than 10 years ago, something he's denied. Some Republicans pressured him to drop out. He did not. Former President Trump's campaign keeping its distance. Is there any evidence Robinson could have a negative impact on Trump's chances in that tight state?
Well, there's certainly anecdotal evidence. I've been speaking to voters here in North Carolina over the past month, and a lot of them cite their concerns about Mark Robinson. You know, he's not just a candidate for governor. He is the sitting lieutenant governor. And so this is a state with a lot of people in the middle, more moderate Republicans or moderate Democrats who have at times split ticket voted. You know, they want to see a Democrat in the White House, but a Republican be their governor, or the other way around. And for them, the kind of extreme comments he's alleged to have made on that website, it's just so far beyond the pale for them. And so the concern for Republicans is that he could drag the entire ticket down, not just former President Trump at the top of the ticket, but that actually he could harm other statewide races for Republicans because people aren't that enthusiastic. He's not going to be President Trump. He's not going to be with President Trump at any rallies. And he's really not getting that kind of support right now. And so the concern is for Republican voters that combined with what we're seeing happen with storm impacts, it's just going to be the kind of drag on the polls that they do not need in a race that, again, is all about turnout. It is just going to be a numbers game. Here in North Carolina, sometimes races are won by just a couple hundred votes, guys.
Wow. Antonia on the ground in North Carolina for us. Thank you so much.
A new filing from special counsel Jack Smith argues that former President Trump bears the responsibility for the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol.
The filing by Smith is in response to Mr. Trump's lawyer's latest attempt to dismiss the case by claiming that the latest indictment in the case doesn't show Mr. Trump was responsible for the attack. Smith says the former president, quote, willfully caused others to disrupt the certification of President Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 election by repeating false claims of election fraud and giving, quote, false hope to his supporters. Mr. Trump has denied any responsibility for the attack. A motion to dismiss the case based on his claims of presidential immunity is now due just 2 days after Election Day.
We turn now to the latest from the Middle East. The Pentagon says the U.S. launched airstrikes against the Houthis in Yemen. B-2 stealth bombers and other aircraft targeted 5 underground weapons facilities believed to store munitions used to attack military and commercial ships on the Red Sea.
Meanwhile, Israeli airstrikes struck southern Lebanon and the southern suburbs of Beirut on Wednesday, killing at least 16 people, Lebanese officials say. This comes as 50 aid trucks crossed into northern Gaza on Wednesday after a warning from U.S. officials that they may restrict military assistance to Israel if the humanitarian situation in Gaza does not improve.
NBC News international correspondent Megan Fitzgerald joins us now with the latest. So, Megan, good morning. So the Houthi rebels, they are an extremist group in Yemen backed by Iran. They declared their support last year for Hamas in its fight against Israel. What more can you tell us about this unexpected U.S. attack on the Houthis? What are U.S. defense officials saying about it?
Well, guys, good morning. What we know is that the U.S. struck facilities that house a variety of weapons that the Houthis use to target both civilian and military vessels that are moving through the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. And as you said, the U.S. used for the first time B-2 bombers. And Secretary Austin talked about that. He said the weapons were housed in a hardened structure and that the precise attack by U.S. forces shows their ability to strike targets no matter how fortified or deeply buried underground. Now, the mission here is to try and prevent the Houthis from continuing attacks on vessels in these enormously critical waterways and, of course, to protect U.S. personnel. Guys.
And Megan, we spoke yesterday about that letter from U.S. officials we just mentioned where it warned Israel that the U.S. might start restricting some of this military assistance. How has Israel responded? Does it appear as though people in Gaza, at least since that letter, anything has changed in terms of the aid they're getting?
Well, look, we are seeing some action by Israel. An emergency cabinet meeting was called last night to discuss ways of increasing aid into the enclave in light, of course, of that warning you mentioned from the U.S. We know 50 aid trucks have since made their way into Gaza via the Erez crossing. But here's the thing. Our teams on the ground have spoken with contacts involved with the distribution of aid who confirmed that the aid went to Gaza City and not the northern part of the Strip. So keep in mind, we're talking about a catastrophic situation, of course, throughout the entire enclave. But if you can imagine, the north is even worse. The UN said just this week that it appears as though northern Gaza is being completely cut off from the rest of the enclave. People, including children, have been dying from severe malnutrition. And, humanitarian aid agencies will tell you that 50 trucks is simply a drop in the ocean. Now, aid trucks entering, of course, is a sign that Israel got the message from the U.S., but we'll be watching, of course, very closely to see how they ramp up, if they ramp up aid over the course of the next 30 days, guys.
All right, Megan Fitzgerald. Megan, thank you so much.
Turning now to that shocking loss in the music world. Today, fans around the globe are mourning the death of former One Direction band member Liam Payne. Officials in Argentina say the British singer-songwriter died Wednesday after falling from the third-floor balcony of a hotel in Buenos Aires.
Medics there say they received a 911 call from that hotel earlier about, quote, an aggressive man who could be under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Now, right now, police are still investigating. It's unclear if any substances were involved. Overnight, dozens of One Direction fans gathered in memoriam outside the hotel to light candles and sing songs. Payne was one of the band's original members when it was formed back in 2010. He later launched a solo career in 2017 after 1D went on hiatus. For more, let's bring in entertainment journalist Brian Balthasar. Brian, this is just a heartbreaking loss for so many fans. We know Payne leaves behind a young son. What are people who work with him or who just loved his music saying about him as they pay tribute?
Right. Well, to your point, this is incredibly shocking. He was 31 years old and immensely talented. Much of the celebrity community obviously responding. Charlie Puth, actually one of the first people that Charlie worked with was Liam Payne. He said, "I am in shock right now. Liam was always so kind to me. He was one of the first major artists I got to work with. I can't believe he is gone." Zed, another collaborator of Liam, said, "R.I.P. Liam. I can't believe this is real. Absolutely heartbreaking." We talk a lot about his amazing success in One Direction at a very young age, and then he went solo and had immense success then. In 2017, he released a single called Strip That Down. 2019, an album. Over the course of his solo career alone, he sold 18 million singles, 2.4 million albums, 3.9 billion streams. But none of this overrides the fact that he's been very open and talked about the struggles that he's had over the course of his career and his life with mental health, addiction. He spent 100 days in a rehab facility and was very open about talking about how he was trying to grapple with his relationship with pills and alcohol. And obviously some of the reports that we're seeing was some erratic and aggressive behavior. Of course, there are more questions right now than answers. Some of them we may never get, but this is a significant loss for an entire generation of people and the community as a whole.
So, Brian, the circumstances of his death are still being investigated, but we know in the past Payne was vocal about struggles he'd had with addiction. Do we know anything more about this trip he was on? Anything we'd seen there or recent challenges he was maybe having with substance abuse?
Well, we do know that he went to Argentina to see his former bandmate Niall Horan perform, and he alluded on social media that they had some things to square up. He did acknowledge that nothing serious, but that they had lost touch, they haven't talked in a while, and that he had some things to square up. He had been somewhat public at times about it's kind of an uncertainty to the relationship with him and his bandmates. And so sometimes he would then say something and then he would take that back. But we do know he was going to see Niall perform, and that that during the course of this visit, he posted quite a bit on Snapchat. In fact, the same day that yesterday he had posted on Snapchat. It's hard to tell on these apps what and when these posts were videoed and taped and then later posted. That's not always exactly at that same moment. But he appears relatively, even-keeled in that video. But we do know that then later in the lobby of this hotel, he was acting aggressively and some say potentially under the influence of alcohol or some sort of substance.
Brian, One Direction's been on this indefinite hiatus since 2016. Obviously, we know the success Harry Styles has had, as well as Niall. You touched on some of Payne's successes since he went solo, all those millions of albums sold and things like that. Talk a little more about what he has been working on in his career over these last 8 years.
Well, a lot of people might assume that the dissolving of One Direction was a difficult thing for him. But in fact, he says some of his most difficult times were during the touring, that there were times that the schedule and the life that he was living at that time was so intense that he was unfit to perform, and yet he still did. Actually, having left One Direction, he said gave him the time to kind of rediscover himself and recharge. But then, of course, he did acknowledge that later on he did have to go to rehab, spend 100 days there without any connection, no phone, to try and refocus on himself. He had been in and out of a relationship with his girlfriend and the mother of his child quite frequently over the past couple years, and it was playing out a little bit publicly, and that we could see that there, and we could read from reports that there was a lot of difficulty in that relationship. Of course, we don't know. This is one of those questions, and many of these questions that we'll have will never get answered. We know he had professional success, but as we all know, professional success and financial success does not equal mental health, and that's why it's important for all of us to look out for each other when we see that they're suffering.
Oh, absolutely. Good reminder. Brian Balthazar, thank you very much.
Grab your jackets, maybe even your hats and scarves, because it's kind of chilly out there on the East Coast. For more details, time for your morning news now weather.
Angie Lastman's with us. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi, good morning, guys. You might want to have those handy, but you're not going to need them by this weekend in some of these spots, so don't get too used to grabbing them. We do need them, though, this morning. As Joe mentioned, 80 million people still under these freeze alerts, mostly confined to parts of the Ohio Valley. We've got a bit into parts of the southeast, and then, of course, up and down parts of the northeast, too. And temperatures ranging from kind of the upper 30s for places like Chicago to the low 40s for Pittsburgh and Atlantic City, and even as far south as Charlotte to Tallahassee, seeing those low 40s. Tampa waking up to 55 degrees this morning. So some chilly air has sunk a little farther to the south along the Gulf Coast. You're feeling it too. We've got kind of a setup, though, where we've got two things happening. We've got the cooler than normal temperatures and the very fall-like feel across the east, but you look towards the plains and we are feeling more like September, say, so late summer kind of vibes for Minneapolis and Des Moines today as our temperatures head back to the low 70s. We've got mid-80s across the Dakotas. We've got parts of Kansas and Colorado checking into the mid-70s later today. That warmth spreads a little farther to the east. This is why I said you probably won't need the scarves here for much longer, because we've got temperatures expected to head back to the upper 60s for Chicago and Green Bay for your afternoon temperatures tomorrow. We've got New York set to be right where you should be, around mid-60s for tomorrow. And then into the weekend, we get even warmer. The 70s return in full force for Chicago this weekend. We've got low 70s on Saturday, mid-70s as we end the weekend and head into the next work week. Even warmer for Washington, D.C. on Monday with 76 degrees. Similar story for Louisville as these temperatures start to get back to those warmer than normal temperatures across this region. Now, meanwhile, across parts of the West, we're going to be unsettled. We've got some snow, we've got some rain to talk about. So there's a couple of fronts that are going to work in. They will give us kind of a reinforcing shot of cold air across that region, so you'll notice a bit of a temperature difference. But the rain and the snow is what's most concerning for kind of impacting plans over the next couple of days. This is mainly going to be centered across parts of the Rockies, but we could see some flooding concerns, specifically across Arizona and New Mexico as we gear up for some heavy rain. This is a look at Friday. Also, some gusty winds and some snow levels that are going to be at the lower elevations. So it's not just the high elevation snow that we'll watch. This is going to stay with us on Saturday as well. We'll still be dealing with the flood threat, too, so something to watch. Those snow showers will eventually start to kind of diminish across the Rockies on Saturday. But of course, we'll still be dealing with a little bit of rain. Big picture look, though, for your weekend. Mostly dry across most of the country. There's that snow and wind that I talked about for the Rockies, but elsewhere, great conditions tomorrow. We'll have plenty of sunshine across the east. More of the same here as we get into Saturday. Lots of sunshine for the west, too. Just that one kind of pesky storm system that's going to leave us with some unsettled weather for the Rockies. And then that warmth sticks with us, guys. I know a lot of people have fall kind of plans, pumpkin patches and all that stuff, but you're going to be dealing with the 70s. So leave the scarves at home if you live, I don't know, Ohio Valley, Midwest, Great Lakes, all of that.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.